We're back. Let's talk about this incredible fact of the Vikings that Leif Erikson, who was a Viking explorer, was the first European to reach North America around the year 1000, 5 centuries before Columbus reached North America. Tell the story of his journey. What do we know about him?
So let's begin with his dad. His dad's name is Erik the Red, who was forced to flee Norway when he was probably 10 years old because his dad had killed some people. It's kind of hilarious in the saga. It says for a few killings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess that's a thing. So he went to Iceland and he got a farm in Iceland, which was already starting to become overpopulated. They had cut down all the trees. There were some climate problems of deforestation and farms just blowing away. So the population was essentially beginning to crash in Iceland. And he got into a fight with his neighbor and ended up killing his neighbor. And so he was exiled from Iceland. So he was exiled from the place his father had been exiled from.
So it runs in the family, this whole outlaw thing.
What also ran in the family apparently was this streak, this courageous streak. And he had heard that there had been people. So the Norwegian Vikings, they were aiming for England, and they hit the Hebrides, which are these kind of treeless islands above Scotland. And they found they were good for refueling, because pick up water or whatever, and then on your way to Scotland to raid. And then a Viking had missed the Hebrides and discovered Iceland. And then another Viking had aimed for Iceland, missed, and hit Greenland. And a little fun fact about Greenland, it is both north, south, east, and west of Iceland. So it's any direction, you're going to hit Greenland.
So Greenland is hard to miss.
It's hard to miss, which is not to take away anything from the extraordinary danger, the certain death of going further west. But by this time, there was this idea that enough people had become famous by sailing west into the unknown and discovering things that I think there was a general idea of there's more out there to the west. And so he had talked to someone who had seen Greenland and reported that there was this good land further west. And so he hired the ship's crew of that Viking. So it's kind of the deck was loaded. And he went to Greenland, where he was able to settle two different colonies. One was called the Western Settlement in the west, and one was called the Eastern Settlement in essentially the extreme south. And that was essentially the edges of where Viking technology could be. A cool factoid is that the Vikings practiced husbandry, raised animals, and obviously this is not an option in Greenland, although they couldn't have known it at the time, but they brought plants with them. So, and then they were able to trade with the native Inuit for walrus blubber and things like that. And they made a go of it. But what's obvious, anyone who's seen Greenland, there are no trees. It's almost impossible to survive by practicing husbandry. It is impossible to survive, as it turns out, just practicing husbandry. And by this point, I think this extraordinary Viking pragmatism is beginning to be played out, because one of the reasons the Greenland experiment fails ultimately in 300 years is they fail to adapt. It's clearly they should focus more on fishing, on other sources, than just raising pigs and cows. But
so we hit the limit of the Viking adaptability, which they have demonstrated throughout the world.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah,
interesting.
So Erik the Red is this. He makes his name by exploring, and he does, in fact, once he discovers Greenland, he calls it green. He says there's so many salmon in the rivers, in the fjords, that you can just scoop them out with your hands. You don't even have to fish.
Was this real?
Is a lie.
Okay.
That's not true at all.
So he's doing propaganda.
He's doing propaganda.
Is this story true that he called it green just so he can attract?
It is the greatest real estate scam in history. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Genius. I mean, it's stuck to this day.
Yeah. It's the most misnamed place in the world.
Yeah.
But in the Europe of the time, even in Iceland, like the dream was to have land. I mean, land equaled wealth in Europe. And here he says there's enough land for the taking, like anyone who wants, which is true. It's the largest island on Earth. I mean, it's unusable, but it should be called Iceland, Glacier Land or something. But it worked. He took 500 men with him from Iceland. It's got to be a significant chunk of the population, but there's enough people kind of land hungry. There's no more room in Iceland. It's too restrictive. We're going to go further west. So he takes 25 ships and then 14 make it, which is pretty good. And then those 14 ships with their 300 or so people start the Western colony, and then word gets back to Norway. But Norway's 2,000 miles away, 2,000 plus miles away. So it's, contact. They're having to get resupplied. Obviously, in the first winter, all their cattle die. It's not a great start for people who practice husbandry. So they've got to get resupplied from Norway. But, the chances of making it to Norway and back are actually not that great if you're sailing without a compass.
Mm-hmm.
You're just kind of hoping. But they do it. And the colonies survive until the 1400s, where they just go silent.
So let's talk about Erik the Red's son, Leif Erikson. How does the journey continue west?
So Erik is getting a little older. The Greenland settlements are becoming filled up. Erik is happy where he is. He's been kicked out of enough places. He's made his home here, and this is where he wants to be. But his son, they're running out of resources. There's no wood. There's limited food, et cetera, et cetera. And so his son proposes going west because he's heard stories that there are other lands. So another Viking had gotten lost, aimed for Greenland and missed, and had seen something. He said he saw clouds and mountains, and there's land there. And then he had turned around, and Leif again did the same thing. He hired the man's crew.
Mm-hmm.
He asked his dad to come. His dad wouldn't. He went with his half sister Freydis, who was a whole nother story by herself, and a bunch of other colonists. And they went and they landed in a place. He called it Vinland because he found things that he could ferment. So, of course, the Vikings, they made wine, or a wine-like alcohol. So Leif Erikson he's landed, he doesn't know this, but he's landed on a new continent with essentially inexhaustible stores of food and timber and everything he needs. It's the perfect place. Unfortunately for him, it's also inhabited by some natives, probably the Algonquin tribe. He calls them the Skraelings, which is just Norse for screechers, because he can't understand their language. They just yell at them and attack immediately. They stay there for 3 years and then give up and go back home. So ultimately, and then really don't tell anyone about it. They just keep it in their northern sagas.
Why do you think they left? Why do you think they didn't stick around longer?
I think there are a number of things working against them. Of course, I would like to believe there's an alternate history where the Vikings successfully make it down, maybe down to Maryland or something, and there's a alternate history of the U.S. and Canada here. But I think there's a number of things working against them. The first is they stubbornly refuse to give up husbandry. So they're trying to make this work. Lanso Meadows, I think, is where they were in Newfoundland. It doesn't work. The climate's too cold. It's not, the grasses aren't appropriate. It's just not going to work. And they do not adapt, number one. Number two, they're 2,000 plus miles away from Norway and getting resupplied. And although they are extremely good sailors and explorers and traders, I think this is a little too far. And then thirdly is the native resistance. It's just too incessant. They are outnumbered, millions to one. Mm-hmm. And the Algonquin do not want them there. It's clear, and they're not going to stop attacking.
It's so fascinating because they really didn't understand the full scale of the land they've encountered, right?
That's right. I mean, had he known what he had found,
that there's more south, maybe their intuition was like, it's just all northern land. It's void of resources. We can't do the whole husbandry thing.
Yeah.
But you would think they could go down the coast.
I mean, if they could have gotten enough people from Norway, or Iceland or whatever, a sizable enough colony, and build some kind of defenses to fight off the incessant attacks, then I think that's a different story. Because there's certainly the resources are all there.
Mm-hmm. Or just keep staying on the water, keep going down the coast.
Yeah.
Not necessarily camp out until you get further south. It is fascinating to think about that alternate history where they would have discovered America and settled there. So this is 500 years before Columbus. First of all, they could have done a lot of the stuff we think about the European nations doing, including brutality towards the natives. But there could have been a coexistence also. And some of the diseases that come with them could have done the damage that they did 500 years later. But now it would have stabilized the populations to where, in the Europeans, the Spanish and so on will come, the natives would be more ready. So Europe would then encounter a sizable population of the Viking descendants and the natives, to where the two could hold on to the land and bring a different kind of civilization there. Because ultimately Europe, with the European ways, the Western civilization expanded out into North America. But there could be this whole Scandinavian vibe.
Yeah.
That would have taken over.
Just a hair's breadth. My favorite museum in New York is called the Cloisters. It's part of the Met. And in the Cloisters, there's an ivory cross. And the ivory cross has been richly carved with Christian scenes. It was carved in England, but it's made of walrus ivory. And they got it from the New World. And the Viking traders. It represents, the great arc of the northern trade. Mm-hmm. So it's walrus ivory from the New World via Norway to England to New York. It's a great symbol of that trade.
This whole just period of thousands of years of exploration that we no longer can do, so it's kind of geographic exploration of the world, is fascinating. It takes true courage. It takes true wonder. Of the kind of exploration we could do now is more in the scientific realm, in the realm of ideas, and then maybe in terms of geography out into space and exploring the universe.
Yeah, I think the closest analog is probably Mars, right? I mean, what would it take for you to be like, all right, I'm going to leave, I'm going to go to Mars. You're never coming back. There's nothing there as far as you know, all the accoutrements of civilization are not there. That's the kind of courage you would have taken.
Yeah, but there's, on top of that, with Greenland, with Iceland, with Vinland, there's just so much uncertainty, like literally what's beyond this hill. So with Mars, everything is mapped. So it's really, you understand the full harshness of the situation.
Of what you're going to face.
So that's more akin to like, all right, I'm running an ultra marathon. I understand the challenge. I think more akin would be like traveling out into like the Oort cloud, like beyond the solar system.
What's scarier, the known or the unknown?
I think that deeply the human nature pulls us towards the unknown.